In this video, we are talking about carbohydrates. So, what do we mean by carbohydrate? If we break the word, carbo means carbon, hydrate means H2O or water molecules. So, carbohydrate means which is having carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. The molecular formula of a simple sugar is CnH2nOn, which can also be said as n number of carbon and n number of H2O. Now, let's find out the identifying characters of a simple sugar. That means, when can we call a molecule a sugar? Carbohydrate is a polyhydroxy ketone or aldehyde. Polyhydroxy means it has many hydroxyl group, which is OH group, and it will have either one ketone group or one aldehyde group. So if we see a molecule with ketone or aldehyde group and having many hydroxyl groups, we can say that it is a sugar. The sugar molecule having ketone group is called ketose, and the sugar molecule having an aldehyde group is called aldose. Ose means carbohydrate. Now let's make a sugar. One sugar by ketone group and another sugar by aldehyde group. So this sugar, we have taken one aldehyde group and we have to take polyhydroxyl groups. So we have taken two hydroxyl groups. So this sugar is an aldose and it has aldehyde group. And the name of this sugar is glyceraldehyde, and this is the simplest aldose. Simplest sugar molecule has at least 3 carbon atoms. Because if we remove the third carbon from this molecule, we will not have polyhydroxyl group in this molecule. So, we can only call it a sugar if it has polyhydroxyl molecules. Now, let's make a sugar with one ketone group. So, we have taken one ketone group and added two hydroxyl groups in another two carbons. So, this is the simplest ketose, and the name of this is dihydroxyacetone. Each of the sugar is monosaccharide. Monosaccharide means the saccharide or sugar that cannot be broken by hydrolysis to make another sugar. So here you can see in both the molecules that if we hydrolyze the ketone or aldehyde group, then it will no longer remain a sugar. So we cannot break it into another sugar. That's why they are monosaccharides. The simplest monosaccharide has 3 carbons in it, thus called triose. Monosaccharide having 4 carbon is called tetrose. It has 4 carbon in it. 5 carbon monosaccharides are called pentose. 6 carbon monosaccharides are called hexose, having 6 carbons in it. 7 carbon monosaccharides are called heptose, and so on. Here we will specifically focus on hexose because some of the hexose monosaccharides are part of our food. The most well-known monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose, and these are found in our food. All of these are monosaccharides, and here we will see the structures of each glucose, fructose, and galactose. So let's begin with glucose. It has 6 carbon molecules. To easily draw the glucose linear structure, I always remember these things. First, the first carbon will have the aldehyde group. The hydroxyl group on the second carbon will be on the right side, and the third and fourth carbon hydroxyl groups will be in the opposite directions. The position of the hydroxyl group on fifth carbon depends on other factors. So we will discuss that later. So for now, I am keeping it on the right side. And in the sixth carbon, we'll have CH2OH. For galactose, it is quite similar to glucose. Same as glucose, the galactose will have first carbon with aldehyde group, second carbon with hydroxyl group on the right side, But in case of third and fourth carbon, the hydroxyl groups will be in the same site, which is not the case in glucose. So this is the only difference between glucose and galactose structure. So the third and fourth carbon will have hydroxyl group on the same site. Now let's draw the fructose. The fructose is a ketose. That means it has a ketone group, not an aldehyde group. In the fructose structure, everything is quite similar to the glucose structure except the ketone group. So the ketone group of the fructose is present in the second carbon, and the first carbon will have CH2OH, and the third and fourth carbon will be similar to glucose, that is, the hydroxyl groups are present in opposite, and the fifth and sixth carbon will be similar to the glucose structure. So the only difference is the ketone group in fructose. All these structures that I have drawn are linear structures. These kind of linear structures are called Fischer projections. But only 2 to 3% of these molecules remain in the linear structure. These molecules, such as glucose, fructose, and galactose, they usually remain in the cyclic form. So let us see how the cyclic form is formed and how it looks. In the cyclic form of glucose, the aldehyde group reacts with the hydroxyl group of the fifth carbon to make a stable structure. So let us bend the linear structure of glucose and bring the fifth carbon hydroxyl group near the aldehyde group of the first carbon. And the sixth carbon CH2OH remain either above or below the plane of the cycle. So the fifth carbon hydroxyl group will react with the aldehyde group of the first carbon. This reaction is called hemiacetal formation. By this reaction, or the formation of the bond, the first carbon will have one hydroxyl group either above the plane or below the plane of the cycle. So this is the cyclic structure of glucose. This kind of cyclic structures are also called Haworth projection. 97% of the glucose in a solution remain in the cyclic form, not in the linear form. Now coming to the cyclic form of the galactose, which is very much similar to the glucose but not in the third and the fourth carbon. In the third and the fourth carbon, the galactose will have the hydroxyl groups on the same side. Otherwise, the cyclic structure of galactose is quite similar to the glucose. So here the first carbon will also react with the hydroxyl group of the fifth carbon for stability, and it will form the cyclic structure of the galactose. And this is also the hemiacetal formation, as this is also an aldose. And the first carbon will have an hydroxyl group above or below the plane. So this is the galactose in cyclic form. I mentioned the formation of hemiacetal in both the case of glucose and galactose. So let's see what is hemiacetal formation. Hemiacetal is when an aldehyde group reacts with alcoholic group. So this is the aldehyde group and this is the alcoholic group, that is the OH group. When they react, what it forms is the hemiacetal. The hemiacetal carbon will be the first carbon which was having the aldehyde group, and the hemiacetal looks something like this. Now let us see the cyclic form of the fructose. The fructose is a ketose, that means it is having a ketone group. So the reaction in the cycle will be quite different from the glucose and galactose, which are aldoses. In fructose, the functional group, the ketone group, is on the second carbon. So this time the second carbon will react with the hydroxyl group of another carbon. In case of fructose, it can happen in two ways. The second carbon, the ketone carbon, can react with the hydroxyl group of the sixth carbon, or it can react with the hydroxyl group of the fifth carbon. Both the cyclic forms are stable in fructose. In case of reaction with the hydroxyl group of 6 carbon, the cyclic form contains 5 carbon inside the ring. So this is the form when it reacts with the hydroxyl group of the 6th carbon. So it has 5 carbon inside the ring and the first carbon remain above or below the plane of the cycle. In case of reaction with the hydroxyl group of the 5th carbon, the ring contains 4 carbons and the first and the 6th carbon remain above or below the plane of the ring. So you can see here one CH2OH is above the 2nd carbon and the other CH2OH is above the 5th carbon. Now this ring is called the pyranose because it is similar to the pyran ring, and this ring is called the furanose because it is similar to the furan ring. In this case, the hemiketal formation occurs because the functional group of fructose is ketone. So what is hemiketal? When a ketone group reacts with the alcoholic group, it forms hemiketal. So it is the ketone and it is the alcoholic group. So when they are reacting, hemiketal formation occurs. And the hemiketal carbon is the carbon which was carrying the ketone group. So the hemiketal looks something like this, which is quite similar in the ring. Now let us look into the molecular formula of glucose, fructose and galactose. As they are all hexose, the number of carbon is 6 in all the cases. So the number of carbon in glucose is C6, and if you count the number of hydrogen, it will be 12. So the number of hydrogen is 12 and number of oxygen in glucose is 6. So it's C6H12 and O6. And if you count the carbon, hydrogen and oxygen in fructose and galactose, you will find that their molecular formula is also the same. But they are having different structures. There comes the concept of isomerism. In spite of having same molecular formula, how two molecules can be different is explained by isomerism. And we will learn about isomerism in the next video. Thank you.